Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Push with Nick and KP. We are back once again to continue our WrestleMania series where we go through every single match, and we've gone through now over half of the WrestleManias, now working on WrestleMania 22, which took place on April 2nd, 2006, at the Allstate Arena in Rosemont, Illinois. This is, of course, the third Mania to take place at this arena, the first two being WrestleMania 2 and 13. And boy, oh boy, was this crowd very, very rowdy. It is the stereotypical kind of crowd we think of when we think of the hot Chicago crowd. Um, just kind of flipping, the heels and face dynamic, cheering for whoever they want, and as mentioned throughout the night, that is their choice. They can root for whoever they want. So a very common theme throughout the night is the crowd kind of making it that much better. So the tagline for this Mania was simple. It was big time. And the announced attendance for this WrestleMania was 17,155. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the first match to kick off WrestleMania 22, which was Carlito and Chris Masters going up against Big Show and Kane, defending those World Tag Team Championship. Seems unfair to have to take on two giants in that of Show and Kane, but KP, what'd you make of this opening bout of WrestleMania 22?
Yeah, it does almost seem unfair. And you look at Carlito and Chris Masters, who aren't exactly, by any means small, but you comparatively speaking, compared to these two guys, they are a little tiny when you put it that way. Um, but yeah, this matchup wasn't anything like spectacular or anything. It was a decent enough tag team contest, like had a decent dynamic to it. Um, Kane and Big Show, they did a good job of controlling, a lot of the early offense. And it seemed to basically just be like it seemed to have like a really standard sort of feel to it. Like it wasn't ever a case of Carlito and Chris Masters were completely out of it. I thought they sort of like held their own for quite a bit of it, but it did almost feel like you're always waiting for that moment, that little point in the matchup where Big Show and Kane would get that advantage, that opportunity, and then capitalize, and that would basically be it from there. We do see a point in the contest where Carlito and Masters, they're looking to capitalize on Kane. They've got him isolated. This is after Big Show goes face first into an exposed turnbuckle, and there's a little bit of a sort of like a bit of a back and forth from there on. And yeah, Carlito does sort of get into a position where he's sort of able to try and utilize the situation along with Chris Masters. But as Chris Masters goes up to the second rope, goes for a double axe handle onto Kane, he actually hits it onto Carlito instead. Masters then gets a big boot to the face by Kane, who also chokeslams Carlito, and that would be enough to get the victory for him and the Big Show. So, yeah, basically, like I said, it was just them waiting for an opportunity, and just I guess Carlito and Chris Masters weathered the storm. And then once Kane saw that opening, he took it and he absolutely delivered and got the victory in the end for him and the Big Show. So, yeah, like I say, decent match, but nothing too special. Started WrestleMania 22 okay, I guess, but yeah, nothing great or spectacular really from this one. I gave it a 6 out of 10, so just sort of like in somewhere in the middle. It was okay, but it was just fine, and I think that's fair to say. Nick, what did you make of our opening here to WrestleMania? It wasn't exactly a way to sort of like set WrestleMania 22 on fire to begin with. We might talk about that a little bit later on, but yeah, in terms of this matchup, maybe it could have been a little bit more I don't know, central in the card perhaps.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. I think when you think of a kickoff match for WrestleMania, you typically think something high flying or something very action packed. Maybe the cruiserweight division, something like that, something to really get the crowd into it. I don't think this match really, with the likes of Kane and Big Show, and it doesn't really fit the mold for what typically kicks off Mania. And as you alluded to, it wasn't a terrible match. It wasn't a great match either, though. But to see Kane and Big Show win, I think was probably the expected result. The Big Show finally getting his WrestleMania win after 7 years with the company to retain those World Tag Team Championships. But yeah, it was fine. It was kind of there. An impressive showcase for Masters. Carlito kind of trying to hold their own, but in the end, the outcome kind of seems pretty inevitable. So, yeah, I gave this one a 5 out of 10. Didn't light the world on fire by any means, and was just kind of there to kick it off. So with that, we'll go ahead and get into the next match, which very much has a different feel to it. This is, of course, our second Money in the Bank ladder match, this time featuring Matt Hardy, Shelton Benjamin, your current IC champion, Finlay, RVD, Bobby Lashley, and Ric Flair, who at the ripe age of 57 to take place in a Money in the Bank ladder match. Props to you. And I think I mention that every year when we have something like someone like him or Vince taking bumps. Good for them. Just looking at it and half their age, it makes me uncomfortable. So I can only imagine how they feel after some of these bumps. But KP, second annual Money in the Bank ladder match. What are your thoughts on this one? Better or worse than the first? And just your overall thoughts on this one.
This was solid. Yeah, this was really, really fun. A ladder match that just basically had so much going on throughout the entire contest. In terms of moments, I think there were quite a few moments as well that we can sort of highlight here. But yeah, was just really, really fun to watch. And I think I want to take a special sort of mention here for RVD and Shelton Benjamin. I think these guys just had a really phenomenal showing here. Absolutely loved watching them, doing their thing, just getting involved. Ric Flair as well. I got to mention Ric Flair especially because, like you said, ripe age of 57, he took a superplex from Matt Hardy off of a ladder, and he also got knocked off of a ladder by Finlay from a shillelagh. So he took two pretty big drops, and like when he fell to the mat on both occasions, it wasn't like a protected fall. It was literally just him falling down and taking the brunt of it. So yeah, it was hardly protected in that sense. We even saw from the superplex from Matt Hardy, Rick actually being taken to the back, and then him being gone for a few minutes, then coming back down to sort of like continue in the match once again. So yeah, fair play for that. Respect for going through that sort of there's a couple of moments, then still getting back up and trying to carry back on again. But yeah, even as someone his age, you still went, put it all out there, which is great to see. Shelton Benjamin running up a ladder, diving to ringside. That was a really cool, iconic moment. RVD, I've put a photo in there as well, using sort of like a chair in combination with a kick to knock Lashley off of a ladder. Just a few crazy spots from the contest, really, that I wanted to quickly highlight. But yeah, it was so much fun. RVD, he's on a ladder. You've got on a ladder right next to him is Shelton Benjamin and Matt Hardy. This is after a little bit of back and forth between the three guys, and I think Shelton actually moves from one ladder to the other. He's originally on the ladder with RVD and moves over to the one with Matt Hardy. And RVD shoves the ladder next to him, and both Matt and Shelton literally both fall over the ropes to the outside and fall crashing to the outside of the ring. And then that leaves RVD alone on the ladder to grab the briefcase and to win the matchup. So yeah, this one was really, really good. As to, I think you asked if it was better or worse than the Money in the Bank ladder match that we had at the previous WrestleMania. I would say this one just about edges it, which is ironic because Edge won the previous one. But yeah, I'd say this one just about pips that one to the post. I think it was maybe a tad more fun. I think both are exceptional contests. There's absolutely no way that the other one is bad by any means necessary. It's still very, very good. But this one is just a little bit better. I think I enjoyed it a bit more. Thought the dynamics were quite impressive here. Just generally speaking, the spots, the just everything that went in behind it. I think it's just a beautifully well done ladder match. So yeah, I'm a big fan of this one. Had so much fun watching it, and yeah, I think I basically covered everything I need to. I give this one a 9 out of 10. Like I say, I was all in and just enjoyed it from start to finish. So yeah, it's a great addition to WrestleMania. Have a match like this just really just gets the crowd going. And like you said earlier, the crowd was great for this whole night, and they were loving this one as well. So gladly so. 9 out of 10, absolutely top notch, lovely match, great stuff. Yeah, really enjoyed it. What did you make of this one, Nick? As high as me, or maybe just a tab below? Your thoughts comparing this one to the one from last year? What do you make of it?
Yeah, believe it or not, if you listen to the push at all, you won't be too surprised. But our notes for this one, KP and I, are quite similar. From the note from the stars that we thought kind of made the match, and that of Rick, RVD, and Shelton. Of course, all individuals in this match, kind of held their own and made statements. But those three individuals in particular felt like kind of the highlights of it for me as well. Yeah, the bumps Ric Flair's taking at 57. I imagine those were his ideas. I can't imagine he was told to take those bumps. Ric Flair, it's probably just said, you know what, let's do it. And he did it. Props to him. The man is defying age even to this day in 2025. So kudos to him. Yeah, like I said, everyone took their fair share of bumps here. I did like this one also. Slightly better than last year, but and realistically speaking, it is a coin flip. Honestly, probably depends on the day. But on this day, I do like this one just a smidge better. And I also love the fact that you got that Edge winning the first one. I was the reason I posed the question was I wasn't sure if you'd be able to top it with your one of your favorites winning the first one. So yeah, with that, I think RVD winning here absolutely was the right call. He was super over, getting cheered out the wazoo the entire night, as he should. The man should have had a better career with WWE, and it's matches like these that kind of highlight why. So, yeah, for me, I also gave this one 9 out of 10. Just a super entertaining bout, and it's no surprise when we get a match like this to see why it eventually gets its own PLE. Very deserving of such. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the next match, which has John Bradshaw Layfield going up against Chris Benoit, who is defending his United States Championship. KP, I'm not a big fan of JBL in terms of his match quality, but on the other side of that coin, I'm a big fan of Chris Benoit. This one was always going to be interesting to me, in that I don't know whose style comes out on top. But what did you make of this one, and what did you make of the overall vibe that they gave while talking about this one in terms of obviously Eddie Guerrero as Chris Benoit was kind of fighting for him? I thought that was a very interesting dynamic considering the outcome. But curious to get your thoughts on this one.
I'm really glad that you mentioned the styles, because that's a big part of what I want to really discuss here regarding this matchup. Because you look at these two men, and you think obviously one's very technically gifted, yeah, a proper grappler in the ring. You look at the other man who is, obviously a lot more physically sort of, dominant and, has a bit more power to his game. So I think you can sort of, really get like a mesh of styles here. But the way they sort of did it, I thought that they really sort of allowed both styles to sort of blend in together in a really physical manner. There was lots of back and forth between both men. I thought JBL was especially brilliant here, being a heel in the matchup. I thought he did a really good job with his character work in this one. And I think that just allowed Benoit to sort of just play off of that as well. So it really allowed both men to really just, do their thing. And like you said, lots of Eddie Guerrero references, which made for a very personal feel to the matchup as well. And I think that added a little bit of an edge. Obviously, you do have, the very fresh history, with Eddie Guerrero going into this one. So it is a little bit tongue in cheek, I guess you could say, and it's a little bit risky. But I don't think they particularly did anything that was disrespectful or anything. And we're going to look back on and think, that was a horrible sort of thing to have done here. I think it was all done in sort of a sense of like bringing this matchup to make it a little bit more personal, a little bit more physical, and it made it a bit better in that sense as well. So I think that worked quite nicely. Like I mentioned earlier, good clash of styles here. I thought that that approach just worked really, really well. And with JBL, getting that winning by any means necessary vibe out, just narcissistic power throughout the contest, I thought it just worked really, really well. We see in the end JBL rolling through the crossface from Benoit into a cover, and he puts his hand on the rope to use as leverage, and that'll be enough for JBL to get the victory here and to become the United States champion by winning it off of Benoit. So, yeah, I mean, I liked it. I thought it was good. It had a really nice feel to it, and just generally speaking, the two guys, just had a good link with each other. So, yeah, in terms of my sort of overall rating for this one, I gave it a 7.5. And yeah, I think it just did what it needs to do. Really, it had quite an interesting dynamic. Not many matches that I think will have such a personal, physical, but different blending of styles that work and well enough together, like this one did. Yeah, in the way that it did. So yeah, I thought it was good. I thought it was solid and just a pretty decent, good, one-on-one matchup here between two guys that I guess just really just brought out a different sort of side of each other and allowed them to work with each other as well. So yeah, Nick, what did you make of this one then? Obviously, I know, yeah, you are a big fan of this sort of style of Benoit and stuff, with that style of wrestling, and with JBL not being your biggest highlight, I guess you could say. What would you make of this one then?
Yeah, so it's kind of as you said, the clash of two styles here, and JBL doing his best to kind of slow down the match with Chris Benoit trying to speed up the match, and constant kind of what felt like the kind of pull of each of those, kind of trying to uh, influence the match and how it was unfolding. And honestly, at the end, it still kind of felt like that. Like neither guy really pulled away with their particular style. Maybe I I'm confident that JBL was able to go faster than he normally would have. But again, he tried to slow down the match as much as he could as well. So it was very interesting dynamic and style. I think Chris Benoit probably pulled out, at least that I can think of, one of JBL's better matches for sure. And just, that is what Chris Benoit did. He pulled out the best in everyone, and that was this particular time was no exception. Yeah, one thing I didn't quite love, and I docked it a bit, just because I felt like using the Eddie bit was kind of cheap here. And as you alluded to, it was very heavily mentioned throughout the match. And then to have kind of JBL win while Benoit's kind of fighting for that, it just felt, and maybe it's kind of that we know, kind of eventually how personal that actually was to him. Something about that just didn't set right with me after the fact. With JBL kind of getting the win the way he did, it felt kind of anticlimactic. And why have him kind of bring it up if just to get the cheap heat on JBL? I don't know. It just felt a little off to me. But in terms of the actual match, it was, like I said, definitely one of JBL's better ones. I wouldn't say it was one of Chris's better ones, but just to get that kind of match out of JBL, I thought was pretty impressive in its own right. So I did give this one a 7 out of 10, with JBL becoming your new U.S. champion. I'm not sure I just agree with that decision. That's my only kind of issue there in the way they did it. So with that, let's move on to the next match, which has Mick Foley going up against Edge, and one of the most iconic hardcore matches of all time. I think that's fair to say. Yeah, I'm excited to hear your thoughts on this one, KP. Obviously, one of your favorites being involved here, and Mick Foley reminding us why he is a hardcore legend. What'd you make of this one?
So before getting into this one properly, I think, you look back on the hardcore matches over WrestleManias up until this point, and they have been maybe a little bit sort of gimmicky, and they've been a little bit, I don't know, tongue-in-cheek. They haven't quite been exactly, firing on all cylinders. They've been maybe a bit more about just making a statement, but not necessarily in a good way. But this one was, I think, I say they simplified it down a little bit. I mean, there's just a one-on-one contest where both men can just absolutely go crazy with each other, and they just made it work on such an intense level. It was absolutely fantastic. This is my match of the night. There's no real surprise here. But yeah, it was absolutely amazing from both men. They had an absolutely vicious fight. The effects of the match were apparent throughout the entirety of it. Blood everywhere, weapons from start to finish. Edge selling the brutality of the match, especially well right after the bell. Just shaking and stuff, and I just thought the character work here was absolutely phenomenal, as well as just generally how entertaining the matchup was, to be honest. And Foley did such a great job as well. Like I say, Edge there especially, but Mick Foley also sold it very, very well, and he got a very, very good reception once the match was all over, because these two absolutely deserved it. They put on one of the greatest hardcore matches, in my opinion, of all time, and probably the greatest. Actually, no. It is the greatest spear of all time. I don't care what anyone says. In my opinion, that is the greatest spear ever. So let's talk about sort of like bits and parts of the match of itself. After a hellacious, probably what is, I don't know, about 10 minutes or so, I want to say. It seemed to move along really, really quickly, this one. Maybe my only critique is that it was maybe a little short. It seems to just fly by. I think it's probably I was just enjoying it a bit too much, but quite an interesting dynamic there. But yeah, after all the hellacious start to it and, moving on to the sort of like the mid to late section of the contest, we see Foley take control of the matchup. He pours lighter fluid onto a table at ringside and ends up with Lita just getting hold of the lighter fluid, and she ends up pouring a lot more onto it as well. She even lights the table on fire, and then we see, in my opinion, the greatest spear of all time. Edge spears Foley from the ring through the ropes, and goes through the table, and that would be enough to secure the victory over Mick Foley and to grab that win. But this was hellacious. There was so much going on. Thumbtacks on the mat, which Edge sort of implemented into the contest, but he actually got sent onto them himself. We saw, lighter fluid being poured on Mick Foley as well. There was a lot of barbed wire in this matchup. Edge goes for a spear early on, and Mick Foley actually, comes out on the better of that interaction. Edge sort of in heaps of pain, and it's sort of revealed that Mick Foley has like barbed wire around his waist, which obviously is really affected Edge. He's got like a really big nasty gash on his arm. We see barbed wire baseball bats and things like that as well. Just a series of weapons and everything throughout the matchup. It's just brilliant. It's a really, really vindictive, hellacious matchup between two men who put on an absolute show here. So yeah, my match of the night for the evening, I gave it a 9.5 out of 10. Very close to being perfect. I just think maybe it could have been a touch longer. Like I said though, it could literally just be because I enjoyed it so much and that it just seemed like it flew by. But it didn't seem like it was that long to me. So maybe I could have had like another 5 minutes of this one. But I guess if you're doing what these guys have done, asking them to go 5 more minutes, you know, I don't know what real harm that would have done to them and their bodies. So yeah, I guess you got to take it with a little bit of care for the superstars as well here. So I'm going to respect that. But yeah, 9.5 I think is still very, very solid, very, very entertaining matchup. And yeah, what a performance from both men, getting a big ovation at the end of that one. And yeah, just they went out there and they delivered. I think that's easily said and done. Nick, how did you rate this one? How highly? In terms of, you know, the way the match flowed, what sort of like stood out to you? Obviously, the burning table probably spot, I would imagine. And yeah, what did you make of this one in regards to like the past hardcore championship matches, just hardcore matches generally speaking here at WrestleMania?
Well, in terms of past hardcore matches, absolutely. I've never been a huge fan of those matches. As you kind of alluded to, they're very gimmicky. Usually don't contain a lot of substance, just a matter of, you know, who can hit who with what, and just very, very random, very out there. Don't really have a lot of substance. This one is not only a good match, but the spots they put on are absolutely brutal. You mentioned this being one of the greatest spear of all time. I struggle to think of one that's better. You know, it's absolutely has to be up there, at least in the top five. But off the top of my head, I cannot think of a better one. So definitely is up there for me as well. The kind of clashing of superstars here at Edge and McFoley on paper, you're like, wait, what? This doesn't make a lot of sense. It doesn't really seem like Edge's forte. But you couldn't tell that within this matchup. He absolutely makes it his own, and you know, shows off and shows out here. So for what these two went through, nobody really won this match. Technically, Edge did win, but this match was absolutely brutal. Interesting bit, the flaming table spot, you know, is iconic, and most people, you know of it. But everyone assumes that the idea came from Foley, given his hardcore history. But the idea was actually Edge's, as he thought it would help him solidify the idea of him being a main event star, and to show kind of essentially he you know, you could argue outshine McFoley in the match that he kind of helped make famous. So I think it absolutely accomplished his goal, and I think Edge walks away. You know, Edge could even do hardcore now. Apparently, you know, we've seen him in the TLC matches, but you know, one on one with someone like the likes of McFoley doesn't hurt. But yeah, I think it's safe to say this probably really did solidify him. Showing off that he could really do anything, and he does just that. In terms of McFoley, obviously he has his fair share of big moments. This has to be up there on his, and I struggle to think of a better Mania match for McFoley. You just off the top of my head, I really couldn't do it. So yeah, a great contest by all. I did give this one a 10 out of 10, and my jaw was on the floor when you didn't, considering it did include Edge as well. But we all know I give 10 out a little easier than you do. So with that, yeah, just a great contest and a great memory. And yeah, match of the night for me as well, which is saying something, because this card did have quite a few bangers on it. But let's go ahead and get on to the next match, which I would say is the opposite of a banger, at least in my opinion, is a handicap match with the Boogeyman going up against Booker T and Sharmell. This one was different, but unfortunately, kind of continuing the injustice, if you will, to Booker T and his WrestleMania career up until this point. KP, what'd you make of this one?
Booker T's WrestleMania results truly are wild, aren't they? Is it one win up until this point? I think it might be, just off the top of my head there. But just generally speaking, this match is probably the pinnacle of just craziness, I guess, for him. Yeah, 2-on-1 handicap against the Boogeyman alongside Queen Sharmell for Booker. This one was certainly interesting. You know, I think I'll remember it, maybe for the wrong reasons, but I'll definitely remember it. It was not a great match. It was more of a comedy segment, I think is fair to say. Sharmell being involved here, selling her distress extremely well, I must say. Yeah, I thought her character work was phenomenal in this one, to be fair. And Booker was made to look like an absolute idiot at the expense of Boogeyman's creepy factor. So I guess in that sense, you know, Boogeyman comes up trumps here, and yeah, I guess he can be happy with that one. But yeah, in terms of the match itself, towards the end, we see Boogeyman throwing Booker into the corner before putting a load of worms into his mouth. And then into his own mouth, I should say, sorry. Queen Sharmell attempts to use Boogeyman's staff, but freaks out when Boogeyman turns around. Boogeyman then kisses Sharmell. Obviously, he's got a mouthful of worms here. And that makes Sharmell absolutely freak the hell out. She gets to the point where she runs away, literally runs up the ramp and stuff, completely in utter distress. And we then see a little bit of, I say a very little back and forth. It's literally just Booker going for an attack in the corner on Boogeyman. He avoids it and hits the Boogie Bomb onto Booker to get the victory here in this very interesting and unique situation. So yeah, like I said, it wasn't great. It was a funny segment, I guess you could say, really here. It made Booker look like a fool, and Sharmell did such a great job of what she was doing. But Boogeyman had an undefeated streak going on at this time, and he continues that sort of record here at this point by beating Booker T. So I guess it makes him look a little bit more, dangerous and, lasered in, focused on getting those victories, no matter what he can do to get them. But yeah, I give this one a 4 out of 10. I wouldn't say I enjoyed it, but I found it amusing and I guess a little entertaining. I also felt sorry for Booker, but yeah. Bits here and there. I guess that's all I can really say about it. Nick, this is an interesting one, right? How did you rate this one? Quite interested to see what you made of it and just generally your thoughts on the match.
Yeah, it's hard, and I'm sure I make it known more than I should, but it is sometimes hard to be unbiased as you rate someone you think so highly of. And of course, I am referring to Booker T and his WrestleMania career, if you will, up until this point. Um, yeah, props to Booker for agreeing to this, or maybe he didn't. Who knows? But this definitely wasn't a classic, and you could argue probably didn't really belong on the WrestleMania stage. But in terms of Sharmell, yeah, she did great. Sharmell absolutely acted her ass off here. It did, genuinely felt sorry for her. So props to her. Obviously, it's not super hard to do. Boogeyman is a very kind of creepy persona, especially when you have to lock lips with someone's mouth that's full of worms. That's not ideal, I think, for most. Myself included. But yeah, it's interesting. More of a moment than a match, I think, for sure. Continuing the undefeated streak of Boogeyman, sure, but definitely more so of the highlight of the kiss with the worms. I think is obviously the shining takeaway here for me, at least. So yeah, really hard to rate something like that. Just genuinely start out every match with a 2. And I think I'm just kind of keep it there, just for the moment itself, but definitely not the match. In the grand scheme of things, definitely wasn't one to light the world on fire. So, with that, let's go ahead and move on to the next match, which is a breath of fresh air, especially for the women's division, which we've constantly kind of discussed in great lengths in the previous WrestleManias. This one has Mickie James going up against Trish Stratus, defending her women's championship. Very interesting dynamic here. I mentioned the crowd at the beginning of the podcast, and kind of a couple times since. The heel face work here, in terms of the crowd, absolutely flipping on its head, as we think of Chicago and a snarky crowd. You think of this match, and actually the reaction, so much so that the commentary team, JR in particular, makes heavy note of Trish getting booed out the building, essentially. So yeah, curious to get your thoughts on this one, KP, and your thoughts on this crowd kind of making this match just as much about them as it was Trish and Mickie James.
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting, especially when you consider the story that these two ladies are telling going into this matchup, and the history between between both of them, and just generally the character work and stuff that Mickie has been putting on up until this point. For the fact that she was the one being cheered in the situation is kind of crazy, but it's also great at the same time. I think you look at it, and you can look at it one of two ways. You can either think, well, the face has been booed and the heel's been cheered. So Trish has done something wrong. Or it's just that maybe that the fans are just tired of seeing Trish at the top all the time. And I think maybe it could have been the latter here. And yeah, Mickie James, someone fresh, someone new, and someone who's very good as well in her own right, very, very talented. So I think maybe that was sort of noticed here by the Chicago crowd, the Illinois crowd. Yeah, I think it was yeah, definitely something to really sort of like to take on board here. But was a good match. You know, it was very calculated by Mickie James, especially for this entire contest. She targets the leg of Stratus all match, which sort of gives her an opening to get the victory eventually in the end. But yeah, it was a really competitive bout. Had an interesting dynamic, and like we already mentioned, the cheering and the booing and stuff. You know, that's certainly very interesting, and it was mentioned many times by commentary, as you already mentioned as well. But yeah, decent back and forth between both women made Mickie, look like a genuine article and star in this matchup, and made for a really cool moment once she got that victory in the end. As I mentioned, also, you know, Mickey's been sort of targeting the knee / leg of Trish Stratus all match. She kicks out at Trish's knee at one point, and that causes Trish to sort of like fall face first onto Mickey's knee. It's quite a well done spot, actually. Mickie then gets up and delivers a chick kick. It's not the greatest connections, but she does hit it, and that would sort of knock Trish Stratus down, and that would be enough for her to win her first women's championship. But yeah, really, really good matchup. I enjoyed this one. I thought it was solid. Just the way they sort of like delivered the story here and just made it sort of carry on. I liked it. Yeah, I thought they did a great job, both Trish and Mickie in their respective roles. Just blending really nicely here and put on a good one-on-one matchup. I look back at the WrestleMania women's one-on-one matches now, not like triple threats or anything like that, and I think this is probably the best one up until that point. I would imagine. I can't think of one that's better off the top of my head, because normally they're like a few minutes long, and you know they're not really meant to be a good match. They're meant to just be sort of like a break between two other matches, or eye candy or whatever. That's generally how it was back then. Unfortunately, that was the reality. So this is definitely a coming of age moment. Seems like, you know, the women 1-on-1. This is probably the best up until this point, which is definitely a right turn in the right direction. So yeah, I gave it a 7 out of 10. Love the back and forth. Thought it was a really solid matchup, and what a great moment it was for Mickie James, just looking like an absolute star. Nick, how did you rate this one? I think it's got so much history, just generally speaking, the women of WrestleMania, but for the wrong reasons. This one was for the right reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. And you kind of said it perfectly yourself. This is definitely one of, I think, probably my favorite women's match up until this point on the WrestleMania stage. And just absolutely kind of leagues, you know, better in terms of the actual wrestling we get here. It actually felt like a match, you know, what we think of now when we think of the women's division able to put on a good match. This kind of was a showcasing of that. Hey, they are able to put on a good match, and they did just that. This match is iconic for some good reasons and some bad reasons. But in particular, obviously, the crowd has already alluded to. You know, Mickey's character is just so kind of out there, and JR really hit on that too, like mentioning a psychiatrist no less than probably 10 times throughout this match. You know, but Mickey sells it so well. It felt so natural, and so that makes it real. And A Tale as Old as Time with the crowd. The IWC will always turn on the babyface, especially if they feel that they are getting too much time in the spotlight, and that apparently was the case here. Chicago more than most, but it is Rosemont, but you know, widely just known as the Chicago suburb. So we'll still call it Chicago. Yeah, they made themselves known here. Trish has had her fair share of moments, and this just felt like a kind of a passing of the torch a bit to Mickie James. The infamous kind of not PG moment with Mickie James, where she turns her hand into a V and does something non PG with it. She got in a lot of trouble from that one from Vince, which the irony is through the roof. All the moments he's been involved in, and didn't like it when Mickie did that. But I think, like I said, this match is very famous for a lot of things, and some of them good, some of them great. But I think whether you like that moment or not, I think a lot of people think of that moment, you know, as one of the highlights of this match, and it was just so different, so out there, off the wall, and it just very much matched Mickie James' character. But this was a ton of fun and a quality wrestling match, absolutely, and the nutcase, as JR referred to Mickie as, is your new women's champion. So it's just a kind of a great moment, great match all around. I too gave this one a 7 out of 10. With that, let's move on to the next match, which has a 13-0 Undertaker taking on Mark Henry in a casket match. What Before getting on with this contest, apparently the early ideas for WrestleMania and the Undertaker streak was to go up against Kurt Angle. Of course, that sounds like a monumentally better match on paper, and probably in ring as well. And Undertaker actually pitched the idea of Kurt Angle being his first loss in exchange for having a really good bout on WrestleMania. Obviously, Kurt Angle is usually one of the highlights of the show when he's on it. But Kurt didn't agree. He didn't think he should be the one to take the first loss, as he's recorded many times on record, saying that he thinks the record should have never been broken. But we'll obviously get to that when we get to it. But yeah, we get this match instead in a casket match, nonetheless. Quite possibly the biggest casket I think I've ever seen. But KP, we've spoken on Undertaker's streak. It has its fair share of duds. Is this another one of them, or do you think this was a quality contest? Curious to get your thoughts on this one.
If I'm being honest, somewhere in the middle of those. So I wouldn't say it was a dud, but I wouldn't say this was a phenomenal contest. I think it's sort of somewhere amongst the sort of like a, I don't know, inner area of those two descriptions. It was a very physical match. Both men just were quite impressive in parts. I thought, just generally speaking, they I don't know, they put on a very compelling contest in that sense. And yeah, I think that it felt quite straightforward. I think it's probably the right way of putting this. Outside of quite a cool spot that was Undertaker leaping over the top rope to clear the actual casket as well, landing on Mark Henry. That was probably the coolest spot of the matchup. I really enjoyed that. But yeah, I think besides that, it was really straightforward and just seemed to be a very simplistic matchup. And it was just two heavyweights, I guess, really just going at it here. And yeah, I guess there wasn't really too much else to say about it. It was quite short as well. It didn't seem like it was a long match. It was quite quick to go by. I think I did mention a moment of Mark Henry here. He hits a world's strongest slam on Undertaker at one point, and he goes for a pinfall. I don't know if it was just basically because of like natural instinct from Mark Henry doing that, or whether he just forgot the stipulation of the contest, in the heat of the moment, hits his finisher and goes straight for the cover. I understand it. It's muscle memory at the end of the day. These guys, they do it all the time, regular matches. It's not something I'm going to critique over as so much here, but I found it quite an amusing moment. That's what I will say. It got a tickle out of me, and it is now actually thinking about it. But yeah, in the end, we just see Taker hit a tombstone power driver onto Mark Henry, and then he rolls him into the casket to get the win. It's a very simple, straight up, easy way of winning the matchup. And like I said, there's nothing really too complex or crazy to really discuss here in a sense. So yeah, it was just an okay match. Like, it was fine. It didn't do anything amazing, but didn't do anything bad. So just somewhere in the middle. Like I say, I thought it was, yeah, I thought it was a couple of entertaining moments, but besides that, just very 101 sort of thing between two big guys. I gave it a 6.5 out of 10. They used the casket, on a number of occasions, which was good because obviously that's the whole point of the matchup. That's how you win. So I'm glad they didn't just do it, literally the very ending spot. I think they used it maybe like 3 or 4 times prior to that. But yeah, I think just the general length of the matchup, how simplistic it really was, how quick it was as well. Yeah, I can't really give it too much higher than that. I think even maybe 6.5 might be a little high, but that's what I've got written down. It's going to stick to it. That's what I've gone with. Nick, what did you make of this matchup, generally speaking? Do you think it was a dud? Do you think it was decent? Like, it's hard to really describe it as such, really, because it was quite quick. But yeah, what did you make of it?
Yeah, I think a dud is a little harsh, but I also wouldn't say it was too much above that either. Um, So your 6.5, at least in my eyes, I feel like it was a little high, at least in terms of what I gave it. I gave it a 5 out of 10. Just on paper, the two of these guys together, you're not expecting a wrestling clinic by any means. But Taker just having to kind of throw or attempt to throw Henry around in some spots he did, you could tell what was difficult. Obviously, Mark Henry's a very large individual. But this was far from Taker's best match, but it was far from his worst. So yeah, just kind of in the middle there. Yeah, the Taker leaping over the casket was pretty impressive. You see the height there on the picture, and obviously Taker winning the match. That would have been very anticlimactic for Mark Henry to take that streak and do so with a casket. Just wouldn't have worked. So I'm glad they didn't go with that. Yeah, I'm curious once we get all done with this WrestleMania series, where this one ends up rating, because I feel like it's almost a necessity to rank every single Undertaker match on the Mania stage. But I have a feeling this one wouldn't be at the very bottom, but it wouldn't be far from it either. So 5 out of 10 at the end of the day. Just kind of what's really impressive to me is how small Mark Henry makes Undertaker look. Obviously, Undertaker is not a wide man, but he's a tall man, and Mark Henry just kind of made him look pretty normal. So pretty impressive feat for what that was. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the next match, which has Shawn Michaels going up against Vince McMahon. Per usual, Vince McMahon. Man, there is nothing he won't do on the grandest stage of them all. But this one had a little bit of everything. Interesting clash here with Mr. WrestleMania and that of HBK going up against the CEO himself. Knowing Vince McMahon's matches up until this point on the Mania stage, we knew that we were in for something. Whether it was good or bad is kind of up for us to discuss here. But a car crash in the best of ways, possibly, is one way to describe this. But KP, what do you make of this match, and what were your thoughts and overall rating?
I think my best way of describing this match is I'd say it was fun. I wouldn't say it was great or it was bad, but it was just a fun match. Like I enjoyed watching it. It was entertaining for the right reasons. And it was great for Shawn Michaels, especially. I think you got to say, beating up your boss to this level of degree, I think must have been amazing for him personally speaking. And he dominated most of it. He was in control for a large part of this matchup, except for moments here and there. You had the Spirit Squad coming on in when they first arrived, and they were sort of like really sort of like beat down Shawn Michaels. Eventually they get overcome and Michaels gets back into it, but then we also see later on Shane McMahon coming on down and he gets involved as well, and that also is a point where Shawn's second best in that sense as well, but HBK fights off Shane McMahon as well. He turns things around and he does end up handcuffing Shane to the ropes, which obviously effectively removes him from doing anything for the rest of the matchup. So yeah, it was it's all like well dealt with by Shawn Michaels. To be fair, he overcame quite a few obstacles here to get back to Vince, and yeah, it's just a lot of fun to watch. I thought it was quite entertaining for sure. No holds barred match. We see Vince in these matches at WrestleMania. It always tends to be that he's in some sort of gimmick match. Whether it's like no disqualifications, no rules, whatever. No holds barred, a street fight, something along those lines, right? And I think there's a reason for that because he's not going to be one to deliver the most technical bout. So he has to sort of like I guess protect his image a little bit more by just basically just taking any sort of beating that he can. And I guess in that sense it makes for some very, very fun matches, so I do enjoy that. Michaels hits an elbow drop onto McMahon, who is lying on a table. He's also got a trash can over his head, and that would see Vince get picked up to his feet by Shawn Michaels, who then hits a sweet chin music, and that would be enough to get the victory for HBK in this match. But like I said, it was just a lot of fun. It wasn't a spectacle. It wasn't a technical masterpiece, but it was just a generally just really entertaining, hellacious brawl between these two men. And for Shawn Michaels, like I've already mentioned, he had so much control over this matchup. There was only bits and bobs here and there that Vince was actually, in the ascendancy for. So this must have been absolutely wonderful for Shawn to have been able to go out and do this. He must have had an absolutely great time. So yeah, thoroughly enjoyed it. I gave it a 7 out of 10. I did really like this one. And yeah, like I said, it wasn't your most clinical wrestling matchup, but as a brawl, as a fight, it was pretty fun. What do you make of this one, Nick, in terms of your overall result for it? Just generally how you thought the match flowed. Vince, he, like you mentioned, he always does this kind of stuff, but for Shawn Michaels especially, this must have been very fun, right? He must have really enjoyed it.
Yeah, a good point with Shawn. He typically has to go out there and just deliver an absolutely top tier wrestling clinic every single time he's on the Mania stage. And I felt like, as you alluded to, this probably was a bit different in that he got to just more so have fun, beat up his boss, if you will. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that would love to have a match type like this with their boss on some occasions. So yeah, this was from breaking the post over Vince's head, fighting off the entirety of the Spirit Squad, Shane McMahon coming down with the kendo stick. You know, Vince trying to make Shawn kiss his ass, and then instead Shane gets, as Jr. so expertly worded, his head shoved into his daddy's crack. Say what you want about McMahon. As a person and outside of the ring, but inside of the ring and in WWE as an entertainer, this man knew how to entertain, and he did just that here. Put him in the ring with Mr. WrestleMania himself and Shawn Michaels, a couple that with JR's absolute hatred of Vince McMahon on commentary throughout the entirety of this match. Like I said, this is to me, this is just a car crash, but in the best kind of way. Just it's far better than it had to be, and I feel like I've said that about a lot of Vince matches up until this point. And yet again, Mr. McMahon donning that crimson mask, and ending with that absolutely beautiful elbow drop from Shawn Michaels as Vince McMahon is in the trash can on top of the table while Shane is handcuffed to the ropes. Just beautifully done. I give this one an 8 out of 10. Just a ton of fun, and like I said, way better than it has any right to be. Shawn being in there helps, but Vince, he's not scared to take the big hits, and he does just that throughout this match. Getting into the next match, which is for the World Heavyweight Championship, has Rey Mysterio going up against Randy Orton, going up against the current champion, Kurt Angle. Yeah, this one was intense. It felt like I needed to watch this one two more times to really appreciate everything that took place in this match, going from 100 miles an hour from the get go. And there was apparently a reason for that extremely fast paced action, not just the uh, maybe it was always going to be, but maybe not to this extent. The match was originally scheduled to have 19 minutes of time, but right before going out, these three gentlemen were informed that you get about 10 minutes. So essentially cutting that match in half. Because of other matches going longer. I'm assuming the match before that we just discussed with that of Vince and Shawn probably being a culprit of that, or one of the reasons, if not one of the main. But for what we got here was a great match, at least I thought. But yeah, it definitely felt like it was rushed, and that's definitely my biggest complaint. KP, what'd you make of this match and Rey Mysterio getting his World Championship title here? What'd you make of it all?
Yeah, you've essentially covered what I was planning to go into a little bit of depth in there. It was literally like 100 miles an hour from the very start, this one. You couldn't keep your eyes off it because you'd miss probably a few different spots in like a few seconds. It really was quite crazy here. Just the general pace of it. Really, 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 really fast. It never really slowed down either. And although, like we say, it went really, really fast and it was just, balls to the wall from the start, um, everyone looked great. Everyone did a really good job of just being there at the right moments, just blending together here and just putting on a really compelling triple threat matchup between the three guys. The crowd, they were completely behind Kurt Angle, and they were even booing Rey Mysterio in parts, even the journey that he's been going on, fighting in, memory of Eddie Guerrero for this part. And yeah, I just thought that there were so many close calls, near falls, and it made for a really entertaining flow for the match. So I think in that sense, yeah, just generally it really did deliver in that in that sort of vibe. But yeah, it was just extremely just you literally couldn't take your eyes off it for a second. If you blinked, you probably missed something. So yeah, it was kind of nuts in that sense. But yeah, I thought that there was a couple of nice spots in there. You had Angle tapping out both Randy and Rey Mysterio on separate occasions, but the other man, the man that's not being tapped out at the time, is distracting the referee. So the ref doesn't see it, can't go for the call, doesn't know it's happening, whatever. So that was an interesting sort of like part they sort of played on as well. So like making Angle look really, really good in that sense, and just generally sort of like ring smarts from the other two men at that point. We do see Rey Mysterio get the victory here. He hits Randy Orton with a 619, followed by a Hurricane Rana pin combination, and that would be enough for the 1-2-3 and the victory for Rey Mysterio. But yeah, it's a feel-good moment for Rey. Even though he was getting booed at parts for the matchup itself, he still got a pretty good reception when he did get that win in the end. So, yeah, it's quite interesting, that sort of dynamic that the crowd does have throughout this night, and it comes and goes in certain parts, so it's quite interesting, really. But yeah, I thought it was a really fun matchup. I really enjoyed it. Just like I said, it was a bit too short. I think they had to really just go crazy in order to make this sort of be as good as it could have been in that sort of like a lot of time. I gave it an 8 out of 10. I think if we have this matchup and we sort of slow things down maybe a little bit, we extend it a bit, and then we remove the match after this one, it would have been probably an all-time great. But yeah, I think 8 out of 10 is still very, very good. It was still a very compelling matchup to watch, but it could have been maybe a touch better. I think, a couple of adjustments here and there, that would have been the case. But great move for Rey Mysterio, in respect to Eddie Guerrero and everything like that, the story that went into it. So yeah, it's one of those iconic moments for sure, and one of those journeys to from the Royal Rumble to WrestleMania that I think we'll probably look back on and always sort of remember, for the the moments that they brought. But Nick, what did you make of this one? Just, I know you've already alluded to sort of going, crazy pace, but yeah, break it down a little bit more and let's tell us how you really did rate this one.
Yeah, unfortunately, for the sake of time, this one ends up being my biggest complaint, is because I feel like had this one gotten its original amount of time, probably sitting here talking about this being one of the all-time greats, because for what we did and the amount of time that they had and to do what they did was as impressive as it should be, and or way more impressive than it should be, in my opinion. But yeah, this was just a ton of fun, and all three men super over. Like the crowd cheering all three men here. Couldn't really tell who they were gunning for most. I think probably Ray, but definitely all three guys getting their equal and fair share here, and all three men kind of felt like they had their rights. Had a couple tap outs there at the beginning, which I thought was very interesting. But the ref kept getting distracted and not seeing them. So it just had a bit of everything. Fast paced, 100%, which is definitely not Randy Orton's typical style. So yeah, everyone kind of going as you mentioned, balls to the wall here. This was a ton of fun, and I rate this one a 9 out of 10. But at the end of the day, I'm sitting here thinking, had they gotten that full time, we're sitting here talking about one of the best of all time. So it's a shame that what could have been, but given the fact that this was Rey Mysterio's kind of big win on the Mania stage, probably no surprise that this is the one that ends up taking the hit in terms of time, because apparently everyone in the back, in terms of writers and producers and all of that, had to plead with Vince McMahon just to let Ray get this opportunity. He wasn't a fan, of course, as Ray does not fit that typical mold that you think of when you think of Vince champion. But it changed over time. But at the time, far from that big muscly guy that you think of when you think of someone who Vince would want to have as champion. So unfortunately, just all around, just felt like they kind of got short end of the stick, which is a shame when you think that they had to cut time to make time for the next match, which unfortunately is felt like we kind of moved on with the Trish and Mickie match, kind of moved on in the women's division. But alas, we still had to get that bit in here. Have King, absolutely lose himself too. This one is Candice Michelle going up against Torrie Wilson in a Playboy pillow fight. KP, thoughts on this one?
Yeah, we're back to that sort of time again. We get one good women's match, then we just revert straight back to where we were before. Yeah, this one was your eye candy, right? It was the the opportunity for ladies to basically just go back to their roots, I suppose. Unfortunately, which is that's a negative sort of description there, because unfortunately that's what it was back then. We look back obviously on it now and we think that thank goodness times have changed the way they have. So this one, it was not a wrestling clinic. It was arguably a match, to be fair. More so just a bit of a scrap, I guess you could say, and it was pretty short too, thankfully. Normally, I would say a match being short is a negative, But in this sense, it was by far and wide the biggest plus of this whole matchup. So thankfully, it didn't take too long. It was over in a few minutes, and yeah, it was straight onto the main event afterwards. But there's not really much to say. Torrie rolls up Candice to get the win. In the end, it's not even, just someone hits a finish and gets the other one out for 3. It's just a quick little snatch and grab essentially. So yeah, I gave this one a 1.5 out of 10. Hell, that might even be generous as well. I don't know. It's a registered match at WrestleMania. Technically, it's a match. I don't think it really should be, but it's one of those things. We're here. We're doing the whole package, I guess. So it is what it is. 1.5 from me. Nick, how generous is that really? Is it? What have you given this one? What did you make of it? And I guess, do you have anything else to really add?
Yeah, the Attitude Era is still hanging on for dear life here, is kind of what this match screams to me. As you alluded to, felt like we moved on with the Mickie Trish match, but alas, here we are. Yeah, I think probably the biggest complaint I have is because the match before it was reduced so we could show this off. Priorities on the Mania stage is just baffling to me. So honestly, that one probably just transparency here. I discussed with KP. Did we put this one on there? We debated putting this on there in the first place. There's just not much to say about this that isn't super obvious. Like it's obvious why this is on here. A nice little break before the main event, and really nothing more. You barely call it a match. I gave this one a 1 out of 10. The eye candy that's all this match serves as. But with that, let's move on to the main event, which has John Cena defending his WWE Championship and that iconic spinning W belt up against Triple H. We've mentioned the Chicago crowd here several times throughout the night. And this is, similar to the Trish and Mickie match. The dynamic here, absolutely crazy. Cena getting booed and Papa H here getting cheered, which outside of DX, I don't feel like that's something that happens too much. And it wasn't just a slight cheer either. Heavily favored here is Triple H. So a very interesting dynamic here in what both of these men at one point in their career were infamous for quote unquote burying talent. So to see these guys kind of go up on one on one is a very unique and interesting dynamic, I thought. But KP, what did you make of this and the main event of WrestleMania 22 here?
Yeah, pretty good match. I liked it. I thought it started quite slow and progressive, but it turned into a pretty well-paced back and forth contest. And I thought, yeah, like you already mentioned, the crowd, being how heavily into it they were, booing Cena, just cheering Triple H. It's not something we are used to at this sort of period in their careers. So yeah, it was quite fascinating, the dynamic there, just the way the match flowed from that point on. And yeah, I thought as a WrestleMania main event, it wasn't bad. It wasn't like one of the best WrestleMania main events we've seen up until this point, I think it's fair to say. But it certainly wasn't one of the worst or like anywhere near that sort of demeanor. So it was pretty solid. I enjoyed it. We see the referee getting crushed into a corner. So like Triple H like just shoves Cena into the official. It's like a little bit of a car crash in the corner there. And Triple H goes for a low blow on Cena and actually hits both Cena and the referee. So low blows 2 men for the price of 1. But with the referee down, Triple H grabs a sledgehammer and he hits Cena with it in the face. Eventually, there's a cover. The sledgehammer's removed from the matchup. It's out the ring, and Cena kicks out at 2. So very close call there. Triple H, out of frustration, I guess you could say, goes for a cover again, and Cena once again kicks out at 2, literally immediately right after the first one. And Triple H goes to sort of stay on the offense, goes for a pedigree. Cena ends up hitting an attitude adjustment or a FE. I can't remember what they actually call it at this point. I just sort of put down both on my notes. And Triple H kicks out of that one at 2. So again, another close near fall. So it's literally back and forth here between both men. Very, very close to getting the victory here, but neither gets it done. And then we see Cena locking in the STFU. After a quite long time locked in the submission, we see sort of like go towards the ropes. And Cena holding on to the right arm of Triple H. Really unique way of sort of like keeping him from really getting that sort of leverage to get towards the ropes. I liked it. I think he should have done more of this throughout his career, holding it back, makes it look a little bit more legit, like the superstars in a lot more trouble actually trying to get out of the submission hold. This is quite an underrated moment, I think, generally speaking. Just the way he does that, I think, is a nice version of the STFU. But just generally speaking as well, the match after that literally ends after a couple of minutes, because we do then, after a large struggle, we see Triple H eventually succumbing to the STFU and tapping out to give Cena the win. But yeah, honestly, good match. I enjoyed it. I thought it was fun. Thought it was a good back and forth. Both men just sort of like brought out a really like good side of each other, and yeah, made for a pretty solid main event. Like I said, it wasn't the best main event we've seen, but it was by no way or any means necessarily the worst. So I gave it an 8 out of 10. I think, that's obviously the same rating I gave to the Triple Threat a couple of matches prior to this one, but this one had the length of being a solid matchup, and it had a lot of content that was good in it. I think it was just missing a little bits that could have made it spectacular, though. I'm not sure quite what it was that was missing, because it had a great crowd. It had, good back and forth. It had a good dynamic to it, but I think there was just something missing that I can't quite put my finger on. But it was really, really good. I thought it was a pretty solid matchup. What did you make of our main event here for 22, Nick? John Cena getting the win over Triple H, retaining his championship via submission, and the just general the way the crowd sort of reciprocated both men. What did you make of it all?
Yeah, it's a pretty good match, I think, in terms of a main event, and I have to give props to the crowd, because I feel like without the crowd, maybe we aren't speaking as highly. A crowd can absolutely make or break a match, and I feel like they deserve credit in making this match better than we probably would have seen it otherwise. Neither of the styles of these two men, at least for me, are something that I rate, as top competitors in ring. I think Triple H gets a bad rap for just because of, again, referring to the bearing talent. Both of these guys have been dubbed that at some point in their career. And so, John Cena can hold his own in his own right. No, he doesn't reinvent the wheel, but he's consistent and obviously knows how to tell a story. And I think that's what both these guys do, are arguably as good as anyone in the business, is tell a story in the ring. And I feel like these two did just that, having to kind of work off of whatever the crowd was doing, and Triple H really soaking in, being a face, and JR kind of alluded to that too. He doesn't care what the people want, but obviously he was getting some juju off of the crowd here. I gave the triple threat main event world heavyweight match a 9 out of 10. I gave this one an 8 out of 10, which is just kind of showing how much better I think the match was, and I thought it would have been, just looking at it on paper. And it sucks going back to the world heavyweight match, because obviously they weren't going to take time away from this one. So it's kind of a bad spot for them. Maybe they should have kicked off the show. We hadn't quite reached Mania where we would kick off a show with a big title like that, but eventually we do get there. But yeah, this was just a ton of fun. Again, Triple H delivering again on the Mania stage. Say what you want about him being in as many main events as he has been, but in my eyes, he almost always consistently delivers. So this was no exception. To see John Cena retain here was a bit of a shock, and a great moment. So kind of solidifying it. It almost felt like a bit of a passing of the torch here, from old last gen to this gen. That's kind of how I felt the match went overall. But 8 out of 10, not too bad. So with that, WrestleMania 22 in the books. A pretty quality Mania, I would say. KP, curious to get your thoughts on the event overall. Of course, the highs and lows, and how about an overall rating for WrestleMania 22? And we'll get this one wrapped up.
Yes, an interesting WrestleMania to go through. There were definitely a fair few highlights of the night, and that's obviously really great to have. You do have your low points, so naturally speaking, it's got a little bit of everything there, I guess. You got your bits in between, in the middle. You got your entertaining, you got your weird and wonderful, and you got your damn right just wanting to forget. So, yeah, it's got a bit of everything. Overall, as a average rating for all my matches put together, it comes out at a 6.5 out of 10 for me, which I think is pretty fair based on what we did see. Highlights of the night being, for me personally, the Money in the Bank ladder match being just absolutely exceptional. And also then my match of the night being obviously Edge against Mick Foley in that hardcore matchup, which is just phenomenal. Both world title matches were really, really good in my opinion. The triple threat, Rey Mysterio coming out on top, and then Cena winning the main event. I thought they were the standout moments of the night. And then obviously with Torrie Wilson, Candice Michelle, that is definitely my low point of the evening. But that's followed a little bit after by Booker and Boogie. But yeah, there's a whole lot going on this Mania: highs, lows, in betweens, comedy, all this kind of nonsense. And yeah, it makes for a very unique show. So yeah, I think it's definitely one to remember for certain reasons, for sure. And I did quite enjoy watching it. So I guess you take your highs, you take your lows, you put them all together, and you come out with a pretty decent show. It's definitely by far not the worst one we've seen, in my opinion, and it's not the best either. So just nestling in between, right in the middle there, with its goods and bad points for sure. So yeah, I liked it. Glad watched it, and just yeah, on to 23 we go. Looking forward to seeing what's coming up next, and yeah, this project seems to keep on rolling forward. What did you make of this one, Nick? Generally speaking, your highs, your lows, your match of the night, and yeah, what your general thoughts were for this event.
Yeah, getting the lows out of the way. Obviously, the pillow fight and the Booker T Boogeyman match, obviously being the lows, but the highs were vastly more so than the lows. Of course, referring to the Money in the Bank ladder match, the Edge Foley match, Ray winning over Kurt and Randy. That was a great moment as well. And of course, the main event. And I think props also need to be given to the crowd once again. I know I've done it a couple times already, but definitely made a lot of these matches feel that much more special. And at the end of the day, that's what we want on the Mania stage. We want a great crowd, because a crowd that doesn't deliver can very much take away from what we see on TV. So definitely helped out here. I think the overall rating does end up being a 6 out of 10, but I feel like it is because of those kind of stinkers that I previously alluded to. But WrestleMania always tends to have the highs and lows, but I feel like the highs vastly outweighed the lows on this particular Mania. And at the end of the day, that is what we want to see. So props to them for doing that. I think this is probably towards the upper echelon of Manias up until 22 for me, at least. The rating may not indicate it, but I generally speaking, had quite a bit of fun with this one. And at the end of the day, that's what we do these series for. We to watch these matches maybe again or maybe for the first time and kind of see what we missed. So with that, let us know what your favorite match was, or least favorite match in the comments below. Have an interesting fact about WrestleMania 22. We'd love to hear that as well. But until next time, we will continue to work on this WrestleMania series. And in the meantime, this has been The Push with Nick and KP. Until next time, we'll see you soon. Take care.